Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Faria Nasruddin, an associate for the Middle East program here at the Wilson Center. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's 5th Annual Haleh Esfandiari Forum for a discussion on women's rights in Afghanistan. To introduce today's speaker, I'm pleased to welcome Ambassador Mark Green, Director, President, and CEO of the Wilson Center.
Great. Thanks, Faria. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this marvelous forum. I'm grateful that even though I couldn't be at the center today, technology still makes it possible to join you.
There he is.
Not only is Haleh known around the world for her important writings on Iran, but as many of you know, she holds a very special place in the hearts of all of us here at the Wilson Center. She is the founding director of our Middle East program, and she led that team from 1998 through 2015. This series honors her commitment to promoting women's empowerment and women's rights globally, but particularly in the MENA region. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright inaugurated this series in 2017. Since then, it's featured Senator Chris Van Hollen, Dr. Rola Tashti, Undersecretary General and Executive Secretary of the UN and Social Commission for the Western Hemisphere, and Ambassador Milan Verveer, the Executive Director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security right here in Washington, D.C. The Wilson Center is a unique institution in foreign policy. We're congressionally chartered, we're scholarship-driven, and we're fiercely nonpartisan and independent. And I always say that that special status brings with it certain obligations to not duplicate what others are doing, but instead to prioritize the most important issues and opportunities, and to try to do so in ways where we can add value and make a difference. This year's topic, advocacy for Afghan women's rights on the global stage, is critical to our work here in the center and to the policy community at large, and is very much something that is among the most important priorities that we have. Women represent a powerful locus of change. Whether at the helm in government, civil society, or the private sector, women play a critical role in preventing conflict, building peace, and sustaining prosperity. The situation of gender discrimination in Afghanistan is abysmal, and it's worsening by the day as the Taliban further restricts women's ability to work, travel, access basic healthcare services. Moreover, millions of Afghans are facing food and water insecurity and the risk of disease, with women and girls bearing the brunt of these effects. What can be done to alleviate their plight? How can the international community uphold women's rights? To discuss these questions and more, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker and a longtime friend, Ambassador Paula Dobriansky. She's currently a senior fellow at Harvard University's Belfer Center, and of course, formerly Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs during the Bush administration. She's the founding chair of the US-Afghan Women's Council, an organization aiming to reach out to Afghan women and provide an opportunity for them to advance their priorities, including education, health, economic empowerment, and rule of law. During her time in government, she supported the creation of the American University of Afghanistan, which gave countless girls and women the chance to receive an education at the high school and university level. Ambassador Dobriansky helped usher in an increase in Afghan women leaders in civil society, the public sector, and in business. In short, she helped to provide hope to Afghan women. Thank you for your leadership on these critical efforts, Paula. It is great to see you, even if it's through a Zoom screen. And now, without further ado, I turn the floor over to Merissa Khurma, the director of our Middle East program. Merissa, over to you.
And thank you, Ambassador Green. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Green. And of course, thank you also for all the support that you lend to the Middle East program, but particularly our Middle East Women's Initiative. Ambassador Dobriansky, welcome once again. And I'd like to also welcome our online audience and remind them before we kick off this conversation that you also have the opportunity to leave comments or questions that we will be collecting for the Q&A session. So let's start our conversation. This, as Ambassador Green mentioned, this is a critical topic. It's no longer in the headlines. There's a lot going on around the world, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa region. But we really wanted to shed light on what's happening in Afghanistan because since the Taliban takeover almost 2.5 years ago now, we've seen the rights of Afghan girls and women regress. So many restrictions and limitations on their movement and their presence in the public sphere. You've done so much work, as Ambassador Green mentioned, to ensure that they have equal access to education. So where are we today, and how does this bode for the future of the country?
Well, first, Merissa, if I may, I do want to thank Ambassador Green, Mark Green, and I do want to thank you and the Wilson Center for inviting me. In fact, when I received their invitation and they said it's the Haleh Esfandiari Forum, I said, when can I be signed up? So it's a privilege and an honor to be part of this forum. And if I may pay tribute to you, Haleh, because you are someone who have stood so staunchly for the rights of all, but not only for the all, but women also in particular, Iranian women, Afghan women, others who've been repressed across the globe. So may I take a moment? I'd like to first applaud you. Just thank you, because Ambassador Green mentioned in his words and his opening hope. And hope, those role models who have paid the way and who've had courage in standing up to tyranny and repression, is so important, and you certainly are one of those individuals. So thank you for all you've done. Merissa, to answer your question, tragically, the situation is very bad. There have been very draconian measures, abusive measures taken against Afghan women. And instead of witnessing any kind of improvement, it's the opposite. I mean, and to say a few words about what's going on, and a few of the recent reports also. In terms of education and thinking about where Afghan women were before, in terms of the level of well beyond, the K, 1 through K, and then also high school and then university. Now girls only can attend school up to age 12. All are repressed and cannot. So education is severely cut and denied. I want to mention that. Very significantly, there have been reports of arbitrary detention and arrests, and a lot of them are founded on the so-called, how the hijab, whether it's appropriate or it's not appropriately on an individual. And here, that's why I use the word arbitrary arrests and detention, because there have been many young women, and even at age 16, who have been pulled aside and beaten and detained and threatened because of so-called they were not wearing their hijab properly. Thirdly, it's very striking in terms of health care. If you are married and you have a male accompany you, you might very well make it to a healthcare facility. But on the other hand, if you're unmarried, and there have been a number of reports that you are very much subjected to, again, arbitrary detention and great brutality, and you may never make it, actually, to a healthcare facility. So in that sector as well, we've witnessed what has been cast as mental health issues. This brings up also about women in the workforce, because those that have to really be confined at home and they can't get out into the outside at all. So there have been very substantial number of cases of mental health issues because of being unfairly confined and not having any exposure really to the outside world and life. And in that sense, that's very, very serious and quite detrimental. And by the way, think about it. It's very detrimental to actually the future of Afghanistan, because for a workforce, you can't only have, as we know, men. In fact, there was, I believe, years ago, an UN Arab report that basically talked about the Middle East and talked about any country that deprived half of its citizenry from being integrated in the workforce would not survive, that their economy would not be able to flourish. And we've witnessed the egregious impact here, not only on women in Afghanistan, but also the economy. It is gender apartheid that it's being cast as. And let me just also in this regard mention, UNAMA in particular issued a report, did talk about the unmarried women, did talk about the cases of mental health cases, and did talk about also the kind of draconian repressive measures that have been very widespread and really impacting any kind of substantial growth before in terms of educational and the educational ranks. So what does this forebode for the future of Afghanistan? I would say that even right now, not very good in terms of the well-being of citizens at large, in terms of a desire to be part of an economy. And by the way, I should mention, when they were reporting on, well, are there any sectors where women, surface? The one sector is a little bit in the economy, but it's qualified. Women can actually be engaged in, if you will, small businesses, but from their homes, in terms of embroidery, in terms of any kind of contribution that may be a small, if you will, cast it as self-generated business, sewing, embroidery, things like that, and might be contributing a bit to the economy. As far as NGO involvement, the record shows no, that there's repression, and actual no, you cannot be engaged. In terms of some humanitarian efforts, yes, to some extent, and a little bit where women are also working in healthcare facilities, but yet the irony that others cannot even make it to healthcare facilities and have access. So what does it forebode? To let me answer that question, as I said, it's not good. It's not good for the health of the society. It's not good for the economic growth. And by the way, in terms of what the Taliban itself said and professed at the very outset, it really flies in totally against some of the statements they made about trying to be more open, more integrative. We haven't witnessed that at all. It's been the opposite. Not good.
And as you also mentioned, I mean, this has been already defined as gender apartheid. It's one of our Afghan fellows actually wrote a really good piece about that. Nader Nadri, I think he's with us here today. But we're talking more and more about this. You were at the helm at various levels of government and also with the US-Afghan Women's Council to ensure that women are not only protected, but also have equal access to education, the workforce. And we see a lot of role models. A lot of them, of course, had to be evacuated. So there has been so much progress, right, before the withdrawal of US troops. So how can the United States and other allies who invested so much in these efforts ensure that these programs continue with all these restrictions in place?
Well, this is an important question, and I really relish your asking me that question. And you have to give me a moment. My answer will be a little bit longer on this one because I really want to give a full and robust answer. It's a key one. First, a word about the US-Afghan Women's Council. It was born at the outset, thinking about the seizure of Mazar-e Sharif, and when there was an attempt to help Afghanistan. And we all witnessed seeing, definitely on TV, women in burqas, what the record was during the previous period of the Taliban, and then with, if you will, a liberation and the opportunity for growth in Afghanistan. So from that standpoint, the US-Afghan Women's Council was born at that time. And to me, you mentioned it, but I want to underscore it. Afghan women were very decisive. They, for this council, said, we know what we want. We want education. Number one is the issue. Work with us on growing that and access to education for young boys, but especially for young girls, and at all levels, not just, a younger level. Secondly was the issue of healthcare, because the maternal mortality rate was so high. And here there was tremendous progress in that area. Third was entrepreneurship. I remember my first visit to Afghanistan, and actually we only met a few women who actually were in Mazar-e Sharif, and they actually were starting this micro lending. And the second visit I made there, we met with over 100 women at our embassy who came in. They had all kinds of businesses. It showed if given the opportunity, women will seize it and they will go forth. And they did indeed, actually. And then also there was the issue of, I'm going to put it in, it's civil society, but it's governance, rule of law. I was shown a picture of women judges. There were many women who were women judges, before. And women wanted to be back into law. They wanted to be in the parliament. They wanted to have a stake in the future and decision-making of Afghanistan. So that was the fourth. And then later also came a work in collaboration on youth, by the way, as part of this. So the US-Afghan Council was very focused on that. And it's been very engaged. So one, I want to say why an organization like that matters. It matters because it brings together a lot of organizations, both throughout the United States, abroad, and even some that are still working internally in Afghanistan as best as they can. And in this sense, I do want to recognize Dovi Holland, who's over there, if you'll just raise your hand. She is the executive director. US-Afghan Women's Council is at Georgetown University. Our honorary chairs are former First Ladies Laura Bush and Hillary Clinton. And then we have the president of Georgetown University, Jack DeGioia. We also have Phyllis Maghreb, who is also a type of, if you will, arm to arm with Jack DeGioia. And also we have in the State Department, which is important, the International Women's Office, Geeta, I want to make sure I got the Rao in there, Geeta Rao Gupta, who, by the way, is also a co-chair. All important, and I reference that because that actually keeps it very focused on programs, what are we doing, how can we move things forward? And it's not only at home, but also abroad. Second, there are also some official positions that I think are absolutely key here. One is in the State Department, in addition to the ambassador and head of the International Women's Office, there is a special representative who is dealing with Afghanistan completely. And this is Rima Ameri. And many of you know her. She was in Doha with us. Very important position. She's not only working with Afghans, she's working with Americans, she's working with others, and she's also in the Middle East, also pounding the pavement. She was there at the Doha Forum, trying to bring this issue forward. I also want to recognize and mention the UN. The UN Secretary General also appointed a woman who I knew years ago, who was Foreign Minister, I believe, of Uzbekistan, Rosa Atunbayeva, who is the representative. And she, too, she just spoke in a very targeted way about the stigma and mental health and how we should be tackling it. Why are these people important? Because they try to do their best in keeping the issue in the spotlight. And as you pointed out, it's hard. But now let me come, why I asked for the extra time. I actually brought a list. You can't imagine how many are still working in Afghanistan. And I want to share this. I mentioned that there are US-Afghan Women Council members. Well, one woman, Manisha Wafiq, by the way, she runs a Made by Afghan Women. Very inspirational. It's hard, but they work within the confines here. Kandahar Treasure, also embroidery. Dr. Sakina Yakubi is someone who many women know. She is there. She runs a hospital that, by the way, does have approval, and it's run by women. It's very helpful. She has the Sakina Fund, Afghan Institute of Learning. the Nuristan Foundation, Enlighten a Mind, Lamia Afghan Foundation, all of these deal with education, health, the Eagle Online Academy. I really wanted all of you to hear this because there's a lot of activity going on, and it doesn't always get the credit it should, and they're working up against great barriers. Uplift Afghan Fund, the Ashiana Foundation. I know here in D.C. many of us know it. They focus on youth in particular, the next generation. Turquoise Mountain has been in there. I had the privilege of going when I went to Afghanistan years ago, watching the handicraft, bringing back the beauty of Afghan culture. It was amazing to us, the Bayat Foundation. Leslie Schweitzer, who runs the Friends of the American University of Afghanistan, and she pounds the pavement and does go to Afghanistan, dealing with Doha because a university had to transfer to Doha, Qatar. But she pounds the pavement, keeps it forward and in front. Relief International. All of these are inside Afghanistan. 3 that I want to mention, and I'll stop, but the working in the U.S., I want to mention the Bush Center. George W. Bush and also Mrs. Bush, and through the Bush Center in Dallas, Texas, have really focused very heavily on this issue. And Haleh, this is especially for you. You know what they've established? They've established an Afghan-Iranian women coalition. They're going to, and they try to connect in country and out of country both. Why is it important? Because they feel that both movements should unite. The women, the diasporas in both cases, and those inside should unite and be very strong in putting forward ideas, recommendations, and really getting notoriety for what they're trying to achieve for women. And they're going to be having a big launch here in Washington in May on this issue, and I'm very excited about that initiative. I also might mention that the US-Afghan Women's Council also has almost a launch on this university educational network of Afghan women. The networks and online can be very, very helpful. There's also, of course, the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. You've had Milan Verveer here, and they're doing phenomenal work. And then the Women for Afghan Women. I'm scratching the surface. I don't know if I've even hit everyone, but I did want to indicate there's a lot going on. So what needs to happen? Everyone needs to continue their work in government, and I've mentioned the interlocutors, out of government, and then thirdly, it's absolutely essential, especially to get the media, because it is true. This has been on the back burner, and it hasn't been front and center, and it deserves to be front and center. There are so many stories of courage. There are many stories about what, by the way, individuals out in the United States who have no connection whatsoever to Afghanistan came and got involved in forging businesses years ago and have stuck with it. And those are stories that I know people will be heartened by, and that gives hope, that gives incentive, that gives a kind of camaraderie of spirit that I think will last and overtake the current crisis and tragedy that has befallen Afghanistan.
Thank you for shedding light on all of these efforts that are still ongoing. And as you mentioned, continuity and sustainability is key to that. And I know that the Afghan girls and women are grateful for what the United States does, and a lot of these organizations do, other countries in the West. But there's also Muslim majority countries that should play an important role. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and others have made significant progress in their own countries when it comes to not only education and maternal health, but even the workforce. In Saudi Arabia, just in the last 2 years, they managed to increase female labor participation to over, I think, 30%, which is very impressive because it's a very, quick leap. So what role can these Muslim majority countries play to basically influence or dialogue with the Taliban to ensure that women are not only protected, but that have access to equal rights as men?
Great question. Before I answer it, one more footnote on the issue about all of these groups. You know what's important here, I will say, is that the women in Afghanistan, those who are there, also feel inspired and motivated. The connectivity is absolutely essential because they're inspired and they feel we are not forgotten, even with small projects. Even with, whether it's the embroidery, whether it's with rugs, because there are women like Arzu, which means hope, which, there's still this rug initiative started by a member of the US-Afghan Women's Council. I just want to underscore that because I know if I can give one example, I worked a great deal when we had the Soviet Union, and I'll never forget when Nathan Sharansky, or then Anatoly Sharansky, came to the United States during the Reagan administration. And the first thing that he said to President Reagan when he was released? He said, I was in the gulag for so long. I got no information. I heard nothing. But then sometimes people would slip to me your speeches, or that, you would say something about me and about our movement. That gave me the motivation that I must continue, I must overcome the current hardships. And in that sense, I know that Afghan women are very strong, very resilient, and I just wanted to say that all of them who are working, whether in Afghanistan or outside, that lifeline is so key. And also the work that our governmental officials are doing, the ones I mentioned, are important. Middle East, very important question. The answer is an absolute resounding yes. Yes, they have a pivotal role. So let me start with this, and I'm going to underscore what you've said and actually bring it back to Haleh Esfandiari, if I may. And you'll see how. We had at the State Department during my time a meeting of actually women from the Middle East and actually a discussion, and the majority there were Muslim women these were women, and some of them were representative, their governments. And the discussion was on, the issue about human rights worldwide. And you know what? There was an issue about, well, aren't there projects that could be done that really have impact and that those in the Middle East can really make a difference? So the Wilson Center was really ahead of the curve. And Haleh Esfandiari wrote a monograph on Sharia law. And it had various chapters, you co-wrote it, had various chapters looking at countries, not just in the Middle East, but worldwide, on, well, isn't it remarkable that you can have Sharia law and at the same time be a democracy? You don't have to be repressive, and you don't have to suppress culture. I mean, all of that is just wrong, outright wrong. I'll never forget when we had our US-Afghan Women's Council meeting. We felt at the time it was important to have two women. I was co-chair, and we had the head of the women's ministry at the time, but we also had a male. We had Abdullah, who was the foreign minister. And true story, we were there at this meeting, and when Abdullah was asked the question, well, what are the projects that you think are important? He said, this monograph. Why isn't it translated in Dari and Pashto? And we actually worked to do that. So that's an example where countries on the outside who have such knowledge, in particular, and it's not where, Americans, and I think of you in the sense where you are an American, but you have that insight, you had that connectivity, and that monograph also brought in authentic voices from the various Muslim-based countries. The answer is yes, and then also officially yes, 100%. And then thirdly, I think of like the Friends of the American University of Afghanistan. Qatar has brought in that university. We had the privilege together of going to meet with them, which was very heart-rending. And here, not just only young women, but young men who have professional aspirations and want to advance themselves. I think that's an important step on the part of Qatar in bringing in these refugees, housing them, giving them that type of opportunity. I would like to see other countries also do the same throughout the Middle East. I would also welcome, like you said, those that can, in fact, also bring these issues to the forefront. And in this case, I think that a lot of the women who've made great strides, their connectivity with the women of Afghanistan would absolutely be crucial. The State Department has tried to hold some fora, bringing them together. I like the fact that through the Bush Center, they're bringing together Afghan Iranian women in this case, through the diaspora, and also for those inside. So yes, 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 there are so many ways of doing it, and I want to commend you and the Middle East program here. The fact that you're holding this today, the fact that this has also been a spotlight for you, it's integrated into your work. I think you have also, in your own contacts, have pushed this agenda with Middle Eastern countries. Their voice can carry volumes and is really crucial at this particular time.
Thank you for that. And your mention of the new group joining Afghan and Iranian women, this reminds me of when the Iranian protests were taking place after the death of Mahsa Amini. I was amazed that even at a time when the Taliban had basically started to, increase their detentions and repressive measures, that university women stood up and protested in support of their Iranian, colleagues and sisters and friends. And that to me was absolutely fascinating to see, that they're still willing to risk everything, knowing how high the stakes are.
Well,
Now-
you know, another thing is in also discussions, official discussions. I think it's also been very important. This issue has been integrated in terms of U.S. official discussions, whether with our interlocutors throughout the Middle East, whether with our representative thinking about Tom West, and also his, if you will, quote unquote, outreach to, Taliban. And it's always front and center. And the tragedy there, the movement on that front has only been, so much. But the answer is, should that be stopped? No. You have to be persistent. It has to be sustained. But it's also these kinds of actions that matter. And that's why I wanted to take more of a moment and literally acknowledge, the scale and the scope of still, despite the repression, I'm not saying they're moving mountains, but the fact that they are there trying to do their best, to have a presence, and to really, to do what they can to still engage Afghan women and try to push the dial forward.
It's very important. Now, speaking of the Taliban, there are, of course, various opinions, on the international arena, whether the Taliban should be re-engaged or relations should be normalized as a way to basically maybe talk to the more moderate factions or individuals and influence some of their policies, which so far have seemed to just targeted girls and women. Where do you stand on this? I know where I stand on this, but tell all of us where you stand on this. And why?
I'd be delighted. I stand very firmly against it, and I'll tell you why I stand against it, and then I want to say a few more details about it and the debate on both sides. The reason why I personally stand against it is because I don't genuinely believe that by actually normalization of the relationship that we're going to get results. Already, I know that U.S. officials have worked rather hard actually to engage and to actually try to move and promote this along. And there's been no traction. That's number one.
Yeah.
Secondly, there are those that give the argument, well, if you do this, then you get a legitimization. I'm going to say, fair enough. I think that's a point to be made. But to me, what is more important is if you actually think that there would be some tangible, concrete actions. And I really don't see it. And I think that there have been really some strong efforts of testing the waters, of trying to see if that could be pushed forward. So I'm not the kind, especially when you diplomatically do this in subtle ways, and even in discussion, well, hey, if we do this, what can we expect? We've seen actually, as I said, based on and thinking about the promises that were made by the Taliban, and not only have they not been lived up to, but it's been the opposite, actual regression. So I don't see that as the solution here, quite frankly. Let me give the other side. There have been those that have argued very forcefully for this. By the way, I mentioned Rosa Atunbayeva. I happened to notice that when she was asked this question, the UN Secretary General's rep, she said, oh, I'm not worried about legitimization. I think that we should do this because I think that we should make it part of our discourse. Well, it already is part of the discourse. It is. It definitely is. It's in every official, quote unquote official, should I put it that way, engagement, and not just with us, but this is multilaterally in so many different arenas, if you will. And I don't see that that's the solution. I mean, the solution is, quite frankly, for a change there. Because we've seen when there is a change, that what are the opportunities that can befall. Let me give one last. Seema Samar, who was the first Minister of Women's Affairs, and she also was for 17 years handling the human rights issue for Afghanistan, looking at it internally and reporting on Afghanistan human rights. During the 17 years of looking at from Ghani forward, Karzai forward. So she actually wrote a book recently, and it's called Outspoken. She's been asked this question outright. She didn't hesitate for 1 minute, and she said no. The answer is no. And she said, I'm very pragmatic. If I thought that we could actually do something here, of course I would look at any opportunity anyway. But the answer is no. There's nothing that this kind of normalization is going to produce in terms of really a normalization of women's lives there.
And the government of Qatar has been officially asked by the U.S. government to, of course, be the interlocutor. And we've seen that also those efforts, unfortunately, have not gone anywhere because they ended up, as you mentioned, doing what they wanted to do. And it seems that that is the number one issue on their agenda. Ambassador, you mentioned the American University of Afghanistan. You were one of key individuals that also was there, I think, for the opening when the first stone was basically put there. And as you mentioned, we met both male and female students in Doha. And I mean, I was struck with how brave and hopeful they were. But what is the future of the university? I mean, we have a number of students in Doha, thanks to the government of Qatar. It's very generous of them to do that. But there are others that are not able, particularly women, that are not able to go. What is the future for this university? And how can we also help keep that hope that a lot of these young Afghan we met represented alive?
First, one comment about the university itself and when it was thriving in Afghanistan. One statement that I will never forget and made by an Afghan young lady. She was asked the question, why are you going to the University of Afghanistan, the American University of Afghanistan, when you could go to the madrasa down the street, which is free, but the American University is not free. And she said, the fundamental fact is, the other may be free, but it's not free in terms of what it teaches. In terms of what I want to do, and in terms of my freedom of my own mind, my own thought, I want to go to the American University of Afghanistan and do what I want to do. And so many of them, they had to pay. And I want to mention that because to remind oneself of that. So first, thanks go to Qatar for the fact that it acted quickly in bringing them in. It is there. It is thriving there. So those that were able to get out there, I think that they have opportunities. There is also what's known in Qatar, in Doha, Education City, where there are a number of universities. Georgetown has one, Texas A&M. I don't remember all of them, but there are like 5 or 6. And those are also provide opportunities for them to also matriculate into and connect with. But what's the future here? I will pick out not just only the American University of Afghanistan, but it's everything I said about this focus on education. The fact that education is a number one issue and a priority issue. It was always for Afghan women, it still is. And in this case, like this university educational network, that the online network that the US American Afghan Women's Council has set up, I think that's very key. I think also, by the way, what Dr. Sakina Yakubi, she also does, it's targeted, but again, it gives opportunities online. There are those that are also in the region, those that left Afghanistan but are in India, some in Pakistan, and there are some programs that also try to continue that forward. It's hard, but my answer to you is, as you could see, there are ways of still connecting and ensuring that education is front and center and that there are some programmatic opportunities. Is that ideal? No, not. And by the way, what has happened to the American University of Afghanistan? It's occupied by the Taliban. It's not, there are no courses there. It's not the vibrant university that it once was, where you saw young women, young men. And I remember meeting the first, she ran for president, the first female president of the student body there. You don't have any of that. So you have to work other ways of connecting in and giving them opportunities on the outside, on the inside. The American University is one means, but not the only.
And if you remember in our meeting with the students back in December, one of the female students said that she's taking, her key learnings from some of the courses she's taking, and then she started her own WhatsApp group, and so she's transferring knowledge to others who did not have an opportunity to leave Afghanistan. And so, like you said, these are very small efforts, but they're bigger than what they look like because of the impact.
But that multiplier effect that you just identified is what's also crucial here during this period. Absolutely. Those students who can, it's like the trainer of the trainer of the trainer, and have that impact. It's so essential, so crucial. And that's why going back to the network being established, I think is a key one as well in this, because a network women feel part of, integrated, and see others, and then it grows and grows and grows. But this is a number one priority, 100% for Afghan women.
Thank you, Ambassador. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit from Afghanistan. I think this is a question that I have to ask on behalf of all women in foreign policy and women in security. You stand to be one of the most distinguished career women in this sector, and there are many other young women who aspire to be in leadership positions in diplomacy and foreign policy. So what can you tell us about your journey? And what advice can you give some of the younger women about the importance of having women leaders, particularly in diplomacy?
All right, well, thank you. That's a wonderful question. I would say that there were several principles, at least, that have guided me and in terms of my own career. The first is get involved in what you enjoy and you're passionate about. I did my undergraduate work at Georgetown, and I actually initially wanted to be in pre-med. And my sister and my father was an educator, my mother was an educator, and actually they said, no, why don't you try the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown? And I said, I don't think so. And they said, you won't lose out on anything, go for it. And you know what? I got in that, and it was my passion. And I realized I loved that. I just felt very drawn to that, having that kind of connectivity with other societies, other cultures, other histories. And so I never looked back. So that's my first. My second is also don't be deterred by any barriers or obstacles. I think all of us, whether male or female in our lives, have come up against barriers. And, you know, in that sense, I'd say my own mother, Diana Negroponte, who I see over there, she got to know my mother. My mother was a very and when she met my mother in her 90s, my mother being in her 90s, she was very feisty. And she had a rule of thumb, and that was, you know, look, if something turns you down, think of another way and just plow forward. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't work, but I like that inspiration, that don't just get knocked down and withdraw, and be resilient. And in that sense, that was, I think, a rule of thumb for me and really inspired me in my own career. And when young women ask me the question, well, did you have certain cases where you felt discriminated against because you were a female? And the irony and the interesting thing, the answer is no to that. Actually, a number of my mentors were males who actually moved me along in my career. You mentioned Madeleine Albright, also was someone who also had an impact in different ways in my life, and we had a commonality of interest because I'm of Ukrainian descent and she was of Czech background. But I will say this, you know what was a barrier for me was age. I worked at the White House at the National Security Council. I was brought in there at age 24. And actually, for young men or women, and I was on the full staff, actually the issue was age, trying to say that, well, no, I have this experience. No, I could bring this to the forefront. I was very lucky indeed. I was there during the Reagan administration. And actually, the various national security advisors were ones who believed strongly that you can't just only have those who are well experienced, but you'd have new thinking integrated in. And I love that about them. All of the ones who were there during that period, I was there for 7 years through 6 national security advisors. So all of them, I'm going to say, had that kind of rule of thumb. So I would say those were some of the factors. Be passionate. You know, if you're passionate about what you do and enjoy it, that's going to further you. Don't be deterred by hard knocks. And maybe I should mention, and don't be discriminated or feel discriminated by age. But lastly, I would say, I think it's also important for you to know your brief. And, you know, in that sense, it's not just, forgive me for advancing because maybe you're a female, but really know your brief and really embrace it and show that you have it and that you know it. So those are some of the things that have really, I'm going to say, moved me along. May I mention a Madeleine Albright story?
Yep.
I remember very often she'd mention a very funny story, because this is also advice to younger women. She said, you know what sometimes really got me a little down? I'm in an interagency meeting and I'm there alone and you have all these men and maybe it's me and one other woman. And she said, you know what happens? I'll give an idea and then nobody says anything. And then there's another guy, another official, and he's saying the exact same thing I said. And she said, boy, the heck, it bothered me. And then the other guy goes on and he goes, yeah, you know, Joe's exactly right. And it was like I never even said anything or said it. And then she said, but you know what saddened me? My colleague, my female colleague, didn't join in.
Yeah.
And she said, come on, women, you got to support one another. That's something that you should really do. And it was interesting that she said that and really stand up if you whatever setting it is, academia, think tank, or government, it's important to actually speak up and also hope that there is this kind of network and camaraderie where women are really fending for themselves and advancing the careers of one another. Mm-hmm. It's key.
Thank you for that. Very important advice. Thank you. So it's time to turn to questions from our audience. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand and identify yourself. And then I'll also be taking some questions from our online audience. I have a few. Yes, please, Diana.
By the way, if she doesn't identify herself, I do know her. I already mentioned her, Diana Negroponte, who's really quite a force on behalf of women. We had the privilege of serving together on the Freedom House board. And Diana you've done so much for human rights worldwide.
Ambassador Dobriansky, thank you for introducing me. Afghanistan has an area of leverage for women, and that is foreign investment. Where is the Mary Barra of the automobile, the truck, the industries which Afghanistan needs, and we have shown can be led by women? You focused on the grassroots, admirable, and we'll keep at it. But let's look for business leaders who, through their industries, can enter into Afghanistan.
Well, you are 100%, as usual, Diana's 100% correct in what she's saying. She's absolutely correct. I will say, though, there's a challenge, okay, inside Afghanistan, clearly now that there isn't that kind of opportunity. But that doesn't mean there aren't women entrepreneur leaders. You did hear me also mention how my first visit, we only met with a few micro-lenders, but then when I came back, there were 100 women, and they owned, a lumber business, another one with a concrete factory, a kite store, and it went on. There were these proud women owners, and yes, they could have their opportunity to grow their business. Tragically, there's a halt to all of that, quite frankly. As I mentioned, by all accounts of the UN agencies going in and reporting on what's going on, the only women entrepreneurs, and where you have a fraction of movement, they're doing it from their homes. They're not doing it on the outside. In fact, women have been pulled out of, overt work, being in a work environment. Yeah. So, yes, you are correct. I think there was going to be that movement forward. In fact, there was a women's federation, a federation of women business owners that actually did get quite a bit of not only public funding, but private funding. I believe that is the wave of the future inside. Outside, by the way, there are many accomplished Afghan women. I mentioned a number of organizations, the Bayat Foundation, itself, in terms of Miriam Bayat. I could mention others. I mentioned also Manisha, who, Farik, if I pronounce it correctly, Wafiq, a council member. These are women, Afghan women, who really are making a difference. If given that chance and opportunity, even on the outside more so, they will have an impact. So you are correct to bring that into the mix. Entrepreneurship and economic progress certainly breeds leverage, without a doubt, because you even see that's the one little space where there's some give for Afghan women, but albeit in a very confined way. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Litvak, Senior Vice President here at the Wilson
Who's also
Center.
very well known here and also at Georgetown.
Thank you very much,
Nice to see you.
Paula, for being here today, and Merissa for organizing this to honor our wonderful colleague, Haleh Esfandiari. Paula, that was an amazing tour d'horizon of the situation. I was curious, can you discuss the role of the diaspora community? Mm-hmm. I remember in a visit to Doha, I met the Afghan female robotics team, and I wonder, what happens to these individuals? They come outside, they're trained. Do they see themselves going back to their country, or are they looking to stay in the hosting countries where they're currently residing?
Thank you for asking that question. 100% crucial, critical, and they already are playing a key role. You're quite right to point out there are those who do not want to stay here. They want to go back. They care about their country. They want it to grow. I have met many women educators. I've met women who are in business, who want to go back and want to continue the work that they were doing. I could go on with the list in this regard. So yes, I'd say there's a passion of applying their knowledge, the way in which they're able to grow it now and make, great use of it now, whether they're in the United States, whether they're in Europe, or they're in Africa, wherever they may be. Because Afghan women landed and Afghan men landed in different locations across the globe. But I know the ones that I've met, I haven't met one that hasn't expressed a desire to go back and to really make a difference. And there's that commitment. So you're right about the robotics. There are women athletes who, by the way, women who are in the police force, by the way, also women who are in the military, by the way. I mean, I'm mentioning all these different sectors who, you know, I've met, and they really had great pride, and no less women in government. So, and women ambassadors, women who are in foreign policy. So yes, yes, yes. Let me connect a few dots here. I also previewed for the Bush Center the Coalition of Afghan and Iran Women. It actually emphasizes the diaspora because there's a very sizable Iranian and Afghan diaspora, bringing them together because they don't normally or necessarily have come together. So they're actually organizing great in that sense of bringing them together. And then also with women who are in Iran and in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So absolutely key in this. Thank you for highlighting that. We've had two questions that really spotlight other areas that are crucial for growing at this time. And that lucky, some of the programs that are trying to really ensure that we get a multiplier effect and get new ideas, actually build upon, whether it's on women entrepreneurs, for that matter, the diaspora, which is crucial, 100%.
Thank you.
One
One more question. And Haleh, do you want to ask a question? Yeah, okay. Daniela, if we can have.
Haleh's going to ask a question. But I would be glad to take, I see it's, if you want to take the two and
Yeah, we should
notice
probably.
the time.
Thank you very much, Paula. I mean, I was amazed that you remembered that publication. It was called Best Practices.
Well, may I just say this? I apologize for interrupting. You had to be there because all of us were listening to Abdullah, the foreign minister, and then he said, the best thing that we must do is this. And we all were like, this. So, yes, I remember that.
And
It was very significant and a tribute to you.
Yeah, it was done at the Wilson Center.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Cheryl Bernard contributed to
As the
to it,
co-chair
and,
with you, or the co-author,
yeah,
excuse me.
exactly. So
Yes.
I wanted to give her the credit. I haven't been back to Iran in a number of years, but before that, during that period of the first Taliban reign, there were a lot of Afghani refugees in Iran. And you would see women at the universities, Afghani women studying at Iranian universities, and you would ask them, why? What are you doing here? I mean, they would say, well, as soon as they go, we'll go back, and at least we have a profession. My question to you is that, really seriously, do you have not a wish, but a hope that this will change again? And what will it take to bring back again what we had after the reign of the Taliban? That's number one. And number two, I also wanted to mention that we hosted at the Wilson Center twice the team that Mrs. Bush brought to the Bush Center on her visit to Washington. She came to the Wilson Center. Both times, I think they were Afghani women and Egyptian women, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. They were here. So this is a good place to have them back again. May I say that
Inshallah,
on behalf
inshallah
of
is all I can say. Yeah.
Inshallah. And finally, you mentioned Madeleine Albright. She always used to say, and repeat it here, that there is a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. And I want to also thank Henri Barkey, who started the forum
and invited Secretary Albright to be here. And as you recall, she mentioned that sentence again. Thanks again, Paula. It was wonderful of you to come, and it gives us a lot of courage to work this time more for Afghani women than Iranian.
Well, as I said, truthfully, I was very inspired when I knew this is the Haleh Esfandiari Forum. I responded immediately. I said, yes, sign me up. But two fast comments. I did not hear that statement from Madeleine Albright. I heard the first end, but I have to remember that one. and Henri, forgive me, I did not recognize you because you usually keep your glasses down. So very lovely to see you. But my answer to your first question, I really want to say that is, yes, I feel I'm positive it will happen, 100%, 100%. And by the way, not just only for Afghanistan, but for Iran. I believe firmly in the free spirit of the spirit of, excuse me, let me put it this, I believe in the human spirit, that it will never be repressed, that is something that's common across the globe, no matter what country, what culture you're in. People want to live their lives and not be repressed in the way in which they live. And in that sense, I'm confident that we will see a change in both places. And in that sense, human rights of women, men, children will indeed prevail, 100%. And I will convey your message to the Bush Center. I will be glad. It's up to
Thank
you
you.
if you want to
We-
take the
yeah,
two. If
we
I'll
have,
give a quick answers.
We have two questions, so let's hear both your questions, and then we'll give you an opportunity, Ambassador, to respond. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mia Baxley. I'm the Scoville Peace Fellow at Search for Common Ground here in DC, and we do a lot of work with women and youth-led civil society organizations and peacebuilding organizations in Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world where we work. So what is your outlook on the state of women-led societal development and peacekeeping in particular? Or peacebuilding, not peacekeeping, that's different.
Thank you.
And also, I feel badly. There's a young man here. He had his
Where?
Yes, yeah. If he
Okay.
also,
Yes,
do you want to take the mic? Go. I hope you didn't mind my.
No, not at
doing
all.
that.
Please go ahead, and then we'll go to you. I didn't see.
Thank you.
that.
Thank you, Ambassador, for being here today and your remarks. My name is Stacey Shamber. I'm from the International Civil Society Action Network, or ICANN. We spearhead a global alliance, the Women's Alliance for Security Leadership, of women-led peacebuilding organizations, including over 10 Afghan women-led organizations. As you know and have spoken to, Afghan women are extremely capable, well mobilized and organized, and have been very persistent in their advocacy in negotiations and political processes in their country, and now to try to respond to prevent and mitigate the violence that's happening and respond to the dire humanitarian situation. My question is, given the continued roadblocks that many of them are facing globally, what do you see from your experience as the most strategic entry points for the political engagement and leverage right now to be able to improve and change the situation? And given the U.S. and our history, what can we do now at this point in time to best support them? Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll take the last question from you, please. Thank you.
My name is Arif Yaqubi from Afghanistan International News Outlet. I have a question. So you mentioned that engagement with the Taliban regime might not work. So I was wondering which kind of solution you are thinking of. What should be done if engagement with the Taliban doesn't work? So that's my question. And also you mentioned, if you have time, you mentioned that it is what the Taliban are doing with Afghan women now is gender apartheid. So if that is, so which kind of responsibilities the international community and the states, including the United States government, have to take an action? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Ambassador
well, let me
Dobriansky.
try to go through these. And forgive me, I'm going to give brief answers. So on peacekeeping, my answer is 100%. That's a key issue. And looking at global peacekeeping, I can interpret your question, though, a number of ways. When I worked at the State Department, I had refugees and a high percentage of women as part of, if you will, peacekeeping because they were removed from society, were ended up in refugee camps. Was it ideal? Absolutely not. You had women who were brutalized, women who were trafficked. So, I'm just scratching the surface in answering your question, but basically, it's an area that's absolutely crucial. It's key. It's one in which also there have been real challenges for women. And I've only given you two examples. I mean, in terms of particularly trafficked women and when it correlates with refugee camps and the kind of also arbitrary arrest detention that takes place. In terms of what's the best entry point, I'm going to take your question that way. First, there is no silver bullet. I think my answers to Merissa have indicated that, and I seriously mean this. My answer to you is all of the above. Seriously, all of the above, I think, are key entry points here because it's, at this time, it's tragic what's going on. I think that every step counts. So, no, there is no one single step that's going to bring about change. And forgive me, I'm answering the first one because I heard the first one. I didn't quite catch your second one. I'm sorry. But let me give you the answer to the first one. To clarify, the question was about normalization. By the way, there is already engagement that takes place. And my comment was not about, should we do engagement or not? We are. The State Department, through Tom West, he, as you mentioned, through Qatar, does engage, in discussion, and there is discussion with the Taliban. But there has been no traction that has demonstrated any kind of positive, concrete results to the benefit of not just only Afghan women, but Afghan society at large. So my comment was, I do not support normalization because one has seen through this engagement that has happened with the Qataris, there has been no concrete result.
Thank you very much. We ran out of time. This was a very engaging discussion. Thank you so much for highlighting all the important work that is being done and shedding light on the hope for the future. It's very important for us to keep the conversation going to make sure that hope is alive. And thank you to Haleh for also passing on the torch to all of us to continue this work here at the Wilson Center, not only through the Middle East program, but other programs as well, including the Maternal Health Initiative that does splendid work on girls and women, and my other colleagues as well. So thank you, and we hope to see you in the future. Thank you.
And thank you again. Thank you.